There's a particular kind of excitement that comes with knowing something you've been waiting a very long time for is finally about to happen. Not the loud, frantic kind of excitement. More like that quiet, settled feeling where you sit back and think, right, okay, this is actually happening. And I think that's where a lot of us are with Doctor Doom right now. Because for the first time in the character's history, 60-odd years of comics, multiple failed attempts at getting him onto a proper screen, decades of fan frustration, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is actually doing it. They're bringing in Victor Von Doom, properly, with Robert Downey Jr. in the armor, with the Russo brothers behind the camera, with the full weight of a franchise that spent 15 years building towards something that apparently needs Doom to pay it all off. And I thought, you know what? This feels like the right moment to sit with the whole story. Not just the MCU stuff, not just the upcoming films, but the actual lore, where Doom comes from, what he's done across all of it, why he keeps showing up as the most interesting person in whatever room he walks into, that kind of thing. So that's what this video is. It's a long one. We're going to go through essentially everything. His origin, his parents, the lab accident that started everything, the mask, Latveria, the Reed Richards problem, the two Secret Wars events where Doom briefly becomes God, the rather depressing film history before RDJ came along, and then what the MCU seems to be building toward. All of it. If you're new to the channel, hello. I do this sort of thing fairly regularly. Deep dives into comic lore, MCU history, the odd bit of film analysis. If you enjoy this video, subscribing would be genuinely appreciated because it helps more than you'd think. And I do put a lot of time into these, but that's the only time I'll mention it. So don't worry. Now, I came to Doctor Doom fairly early. I remember watching the 2005 Fantastic Four film as a kid and being more interested in Julian McMahon's Victor Von Doom than in any of the actual heroes, which probably says something about me. But it wasn't until I actually started reading the comics, the John Byrne run, the Mark Waid stuff, eventually Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars, that I understood what the character was actually supposed to be, which is so much more than a jealous ex-colleague in a metal suit. The thing about Doom is that he works on multiple levels simultaneously. He's a tragedy. He's a political statement. He's a philosophical puzzle about power and competence, and what we'd be willing to accept from a leader if the leader was genuinely good at leading. And he's, frankly, just a very entertaining character to spend time with, because he has no patience for anyone. He never apologizes for anything. And he once pressed a still hot iron mask to his own face because he couldn't wait for it to cool down. We'll get to that. What I find particularly compelling about Doom, compared to most other major Marvel villains, is that his worldview has internal coherence. Thanos believes in a kind of cosmic population control that the films themselves treat as an interesting position even while they refute it. Magneto believes that mutants have been persecuted enough to justify any response. Doom believes that the world is badly governed and that he could govern it better. And across the full run of the comics, the world has essentially never managed to prove him wrong within his own framework. He keeps getting there. He keeps reaching the top of whatever mountain he's aimed at. The thing that stops him is always himself. But first, And this feels important to establish before anything else. Doom is not really a villain in the traditional sense. He's something more interesting than that. He's a man who decided very early in his life that the world was cruel and incompetent, and that the only response to a cruel and incompetent world was to become so extraordinarily capable that the cruelty could no longer reach him. The problem is that by the time he achieved that, the cruelty had already done its work. We'll get into all of it. Let's start at the beginning. Not Victor's beginning, but the character's beginning. A 2-page conversation between Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and a decision that would create one of the most enduring villains in the history of comics. Dr. Doom first appears in Fantastic Four, Issue 5, published in July of 1962, which is, if you're keeping track, roughly a year after the Fantastic Four themselves debuted. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had already established Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, and Ben Grimm. And then, almost immediately, they created the character who would define them as heroes more than any other single factor. There's something interesting about the timing. A lot of classic Marvel villains feel like they were invented to fill a specific story slot. We need a monster for this issue. We need a conqueror for that one. Doom feels different. He feels like someone they'd been building toward without quite knowing it. And when they got there, they committed entirely. Kirby's visual design is the first thing worth sitting with. The armor, the green cloak, the iron mask with those slightly elongated eye slits. It's immediately iconic, and also, in retrospect, completely bizarre. This is a character who wears full medieval plate armor with a hooded cloak, and nobody in the Marvel universe ever seems to find this especially peculiar. He just walks into the United Nations, and people go, "Ah, yes, Dr. Doom," and get out of the way, which, honestly, is exactly the right response. Kirby reportedly brought a lot of the visual DNA himself, and there's an interpretation, and I find this genuinely compelling, that some of Doom's design reflects Kirby's own feelings about authority and armoring oneself against a hostile world. Kirby was Jewish, had served in World War II, had seen what happened when unchecked authority met defenseless people. The idea of a character who wraps himself so completely in impenetrable armor that nothing can touch him anymore has a kind of weight to it that goes beyond the superhero genre. But what makes Doom different from almost every villain that existed before him is that he rules a country. Not a base, not a lair, an actual sovereign state with actual citizens who actually depend on him. Latveria is, by the time Doom appears, already a going concern, a small European nation in the Carpathians with a population and an economy and a place on the map. Most villains in 1962 had a volcano to hide in. Doom had a GDP. His very first appearance already has him pulling off a scheme involving time travel. He sends the Fantastic Four back in time to steal Blackbeard's treasure. In issue 5, this is not a character with modest ambitions. The early run establishes something that never really goes away. Doom considers the Fantastic Four a secondary concern. They're in his way occasionally, and he deals with them when necessary, but his actual interests are much larger. He wants to rescue his mother from Mephisto's realm. He wants to prove his genius is unmatched. He wants to rule the world, not out of some abstract evil desire, but because he genuinely believes it would be better off under his management. and the comics, to their credit, never quite prove him wrong. There's an interesting note in the character's publishing history that I think about sometimes. In the 1970s, as Marvel was expanding into more diverse titles, Doom started appearing outside Fantastic Four on a fairly regular basis. He had his own feature in Astonishing Tales. He appeared in team-ups with the Hulk, with Black Panther, in supervillain team-up. And in all of these guest appearances, the character maintains his dignity completely. There's no version of Doom who's diminished by appearing in someone else's book. He turns up, he pursues his agenda, he leaves when he's done. He doesn't take second billing to anyone. The 1970s also saw the establishment of his ties to Mephisto in print. Astonishing Tales made explicit what had been implied, that the whole architecture of Doom's mother soul and the demonic bargain was a real ongoing concern rather than just backstory flavoring. This gave the character a personal stake that ran deeper than his political ambitions, and it made Doom's periodic descents into Mephisto's realm feel less like villain scheme of the week and more like the through line they actually are. One thing I always mention when talking about Doom's cultural footprint, and I find this genuinely lovely as a tribute, is MF Doom. Daniel Dumile, the rapper, adopted not just the stage name, but the actual mask, the persona, the mythology. He performed in the mask. He sent imposters to shows in his place. He built an artistic identity around the idea of the mask as transformation. There's a version of this where it's just a gimmick. But Dumile was clearly someone who understood what the character was actually about. Concealment as protection, identity as performance. The gap between what you show the world and what you actually are. He understood Doom better than most of the people who made films about him, which is a sentence I genuinely mean. Doom has consistently been listed as one of the greatest comic book villains ever created, not just within Marvel, but across the medium. He appears on those lists alongside the Joker, Lex Luthor, Darth Vader. Characters who have had decades and multiple acclaimed adaptations to build their reputation. Doom built his in the pages of Fantastic Four, in a genre that wasn't always taken seriously, and he outlasted almost everything around him, which makes the film history rather painful, actually, but we'll get to that later. For now, the character exists. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby put him on the page in 1962, and the comic book world has never quite recovered. Now let's talk about where Victor Von Doom actually came from, because the backstory is extraordinary, and it's the kind of tragedy that makes everything else about him make sense. Victor Von Doom is born in Latveria, which is, as established across various comic runs, a small country in the Carpathians, vaguely Eastern European, in the way that fictional countries often are. Think somewhere between Romania and Hungary. Old forests, old superstitions, mountains that have been keeping secrets since before anyone thought to write them down. His people are the Zahiro clan, a Romani group who have been persecuted in Latveria for generations. The local baron rules through fear and favoritism, and the Zahiro exist at the margins, not quite outlaws, not quite protected, surviving in the space between official contempt and practical necessity. This is the world Victor is born into, and it's worth sitting with that for a moment because it shapes everything that comes after. His father is Werner von Doom, and Werner is, by all accounts, a genuinely good man. He's a healer. He treats the sick among his clan and the peasants in the surrounding villages, often for nothing, because they have nothing to give. He's not ambitious, not powerful, not interested in anything beyond the quiet work of keeping people alive. In another story, Werner would be the hero. In Doom's story, being a good man turns out to be exactly the kind of vulnerability that gets you killed. His mother is Cynthia von Doom, and she's a different matter entirely. Cynthia is a practitioner of the mystic arts, real ones. She has knowledge that goes beyond folk remedies and superstition. She works with forces that actually respond, powers that come with costs, and at some point, facing the continued suffering of her people under the Baron's rule, she makes a decision that most people would consider insane. She bargains with Mephisto. Mephisto, in the Marvel universe, is the closest thing to a traditional devil that exists. He rules a demonic realm. He collects souls. He makes deals with mortals. And he has an extraordinary talent for fulfilling the letter of a bargain while destroying its spirit entirely. The idea that anyone would willingly make a deal with Mephisto to protect their community is either an act of profound love or a catastrophic miscalculation, and Cynthia's story suggests it's both at once. The deal goes wrong. Mephisto corrupts it. There's a massacre. Cynthia's power turned back against the very people she was trying to protect. She's fatally stabbed in the chaos, and she dies in Werner's arms. And Mephisto takes her soul. I find this part of the backstory genuinely affecting, and I think it's worth saying so. This isn't just an origin story mechanism. This is a woman who loved her people enough to bargain with the devil, and the devil took her anyway. And everything Victor does for the rest of his life, every scheme, every kingdom, every cosmic power he steals, exists in some relationship to that moment. His mother is in hell. He put her there in the sense that her powers were corrupted into the instrument of the massacre, and he can never undo it. After Cynthia's death, Baron Vladimir blames Werner. The Baroness has fallen ill, unrelated, probably, to the chaos, but the Baron needs someone to blame, and Werner is convenient. He's branded a murderer and driven out of Latveria with his young son into the winter. What happens next is the kind of thing that gets recounted in a few lines in most comic summaries, but deserves a moment's attention. Werner and Victor flee into the mountains in winter. Werner is a healer, not a soldier, not a survivor. He has no supplies, no shelter, no allies, and he has a child who cannot survive this alone. Werner gives Victor his coat. He shields the boy with his own body against the cold. He keeps him warm through the night, whispering comfort, giving away heat he cannot spare. And he freezes to death doing it. There's something about this that I find particularly hard to move past, probably because the specific quality of Werner's death, not violent, not dramatic, just a father slowly giving everything he has in a way that the child can't even fully understand is happening, is one of the most quietly devastating things in Doom's mythology. Werner von Doom was not a hero in any conventional sense. He couldn't save his wife. He couldn't protect his family from the Baron's cruelty. He froze to death in a forest because a powerful man wanted someone to blame, but he kept his son alive. That's what he managed. And it was enough for the world to receive Victor von Doom. Victor is found alone in the snow, alive, by villagers who should probably have expected something like this to produce a very unusual adult. They whisper that he's cursed, the son of a witch, a boy who survived when he shouldn't have. They're not wrong about the curse. They're just wrong about what kind. The thing about this backstory that always strikes me is how completely it explains Doom's obsession with control. He was a child, twice, watching someone he loved be destroyed by forces he couldn't touch. First his mother, taken by Mephisto. Then his father, taken by cold and the cruelty of a man who held all the power. And there was nothing young Victor could do about either of it. He was helpless in a way that children are, in the most complete and terrible sense of the word. So he decided, fairly early, that he would never be helpless again. And he applied the entirety of his extraordinary mind to that project for the rest of his life. The armor, the kingdom, the cosmic power. It's all the same answer to the same question. How do you protect the people you love when the world is this dangerous? You become more dangerous than the world. You become the thing that other dangerous things are afraid of, which is a perfectly understandable response, really. It's also completely incompatible with being a healthy person, with functional relationships. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Victor doesn't grieve the way most children grieve. Or if he does, he doesn't do it for long. Or he does it in a way that looks from the outside like something else entirely. What he does, from a very early age, is learn. He tears through books, science, medicine, engineering, the occult. He treats all of it as equally valid, which is actually a fairly radical epistemological position for a child in rural Eastern Europe to be holding. But Victor doesn't particularly care about conventional epistemology. He cares about what works. He cares about what he can use. And he pursues knowledge with a kind of hunger that the comics describe at various points as frightening in a person so young. By his teenage years, he's building devices from salvage. Things that, depending on which comic run you're reading, can do things like communicate with the dead, heal wounds that conventional medicine can't touch, or destroy anyone who comes at him with bad intentions. He makes these from whatever he can find: broken machinery, salvaged parts, whatever the Zahiro clan has lying around. Which is, to put it mildly, not much. I think about this detail sometimes. Most of us, if we'd wanted to build something extraordinary as teenagers, would have needed resources, equipment, a lab, at minimum. Victor built interdimensional communication devices from scrap. The gap between his capabilities and his circumstances is part of what makes him so compelling and so dangerous eventually, because a mind that capable with proper resources is genuinely terrifying to contemplate. Word spreads, as it tends to do with people who are doing impossible things in unlikely places. Eventually, it reaches the dean of Empire State University in New York, who offers Victor a scholarship, which is both a tribute to Victor's abilities and, in retrospect, a decision that puts him in the same building as Reed Richards. So the jury is somewhat out on whether it was a good idea. Victor arrives in America with no interest in making friends, no patience for academic politics, and approximately zero tolerance for anyone who thinks they know more than he does. He's there for two reasons: to master science and sorcery at the highest possible level, and to find a way to free his mother from Mephisto's realm. Everything else is secondary. At ESU, he meets Reed Richards. Now, I want to be careful here, because this relationship is important enough that it gets its own section later. But for now, just the basic setup. Reed Richards is, by any reasonable measure, another generational genius. He's curious, collaborative, warm in the way that Victor specifically is not. And for a brief moment, a very brief moment, Victor recognizes something like an equal. Victor does not share. Victor does not collaborate. Victor does not take feedback well. These are not incidental character details. They're the core of the tragedy. Because in another story, with different people, the meeting of two minds this extraordinary might have produced something remarkable. Instead, it produced an explosion and a grudge that never fully healed. There's also something worth noting about what Victor's self-taught background means for his relationship with academic institutions. He arrives at ESU having already achieved things that most of its faculty probably couldn't replicate, having crossed disciplinary lines that the academy kept carefully separated, having developed his own frameworks for understanding reality that don't always map cleanly onto orthodox science or orthodox sorcery. He doesn't come in as a student in the conventional sense. He comes in to find the limits of existing knowledge and push past them. This is admirable in the abstract. It's also, practically speaking, not the easiest way to make friends or to build the kind of collaborative relationships that tend to produce the best science. Reed Richards works differently. He's genuinely curious about what other people know, genuinely willing to hear corrections, genuinely interested in the process of being wrong and becoming less wrong. These are, it turns out, the qualities that make someone good to work with. Victor has none of them. But we'll get there. The point of this section is Victor before the accident, this extraordinary boy who grew up into an extraordinary young man, who built impossible things in impossible circumstances, who arrived at one of America's top universities on the strength of pure self-taught genius, who was, in some fundamental sense, doing exactly what his father would have wanted for him, getting out of Latveria, making something of himself, finding a different life. The tragedy is that he couldn't actually do any of those things, not because he wasn't capable, because he was incapable of accepting that he might be wrong about something, which is the kind of flaw that sounds abstract until it literally destroys your face. Victor builds a machine in his dorm room at Empire State University. This is already several fire codes deep into inadvisable territory, but we've established that Victor doesn't concern himself overly with institutional rules. The machine is designed to send his astral form into other dimensions, specifically into the realm where Mephisto has been holding his mother's soul. The goal is contact, proof of life, so to speak, a first step toward an eventual rescue. This is, to be absolutely clear, an extraordinary thing to attempt. Astral projection into demonic realms is not a graduate-level project. It's not really a doctoral project. It is, by any conventional academic standard, completely insane. But Victor had been doing impossible things since he was 12, and he saw no particular reason to stop now. Reed Richards, studying somewhere in the same building, notices something in Victor's equations. A flaw, a miscalculation that, in Reed's assessment, could cause the device to malfunction badly. And Reed, being the kind of person who genuinely believes that pointing out errors is a form of kindness, attempts to tell Victor about it. What happens next depends somewhat on which version of the story you're reading. In some accounts, Victor hears the warning and dismisses it entirely out of pride. In others, there's a miscommunication, and the warning doesn't fully land. In all versions, Victor does not incorporate Reed's feedback into his calculations. The machine activates, and it explodes. Victor's face is scarred. There's a long-standing debate in the comics about the extent of the scarring. Early issues suggested it might have been quite small, a single burn, less disfiguring than Victor perceived it, that his pride made a minor injury feel catastrophic, which would mean he made an almost unimaginably destructive choice based on vanity rather than genuine necessity. Later runs leaned into more severe disfigurement. In those versions, the scarring is real and extensive, and the mask is functional concealment rather than purely psychological. The interesting thing is that it almost doesn't matter, because either way, What the explosion actually destroyed was not Victor's face. It was his self-image as infallible. He built a machine, the machine failed, and the failure left a permanent mark. That's what broke him, not the pain, not the physical damage, but the evidence written on his own face that he had made a mistake. He's expelled from Empire State for the unauthorized experiment. He blames Reed Richards. He has blamed Reed Richards in some form or another for essentially everything that has gone wrong in his life ever since, which is both deeply unfair and also, from a certain angle, completely understandable. Because if Reed is responsible, then Victor doesn't have to be. And Victor refusing to accept responsibility for his own mistakes is, at this point in the story, the most important fact about him. He wanders after the expulsion. The accounts vary on the specifics. Sometime in Europe, probably. Sometime simply drifting. And then he ends up collapsing in Tibet. The Tibetan monks who find him are, by most accounts, a genuine contemplative order with real mystic knowledge. They nurse him back to health. And then, because this is Victor Von Doom, and he genuinely cannot do anything in a straightforward way, he starts absorbing their knowledge while simultaneously bringing his own materials, grimoires from Latveria, forbidden texts, and layering new spells on top of ancient rituals in a way that no monastic tradition would sanction. He uses their traditions. He doesn't particularly join them, which is, as personality summaries go, fairly succinct. The mask gets forged in the Tibetan mountains, and the story of how it gets onto Victor's face is one of my favorite details in the entire Doom mythology because it is so perfectly, almost embarrassingly, on the nose as a metaphor. Victor commissions the iron mask from the monks. He designs it himself, specifies every dimension, oversees the forging, and then, when it's ready, he presses it to his face before it's finished cooling. The mask burns him. It adds to the scarring. I genuinely don't know what else to say about that, except that the whole of Victor Von Doom is in that moment. His pride caused the original wound. His impatience then deepened it. The thing he made to hide the damage became part of the damage. He literally could not wait for his own armor to cool before putting it on. This is either the most obvious metaphor in the history of sequential art, or proof that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were operating on a level of psychological sophistication that gets underappreciated, and I think probably it's both. When Victor emerges from Tibet, he is no longer Victor Von Doom in any meaningful sense, or rather, he's no longer willing to be. Victor Von Doom is the boy who lost his parents, the student who failed his experiment, the young man who couldn't accept his own fallibility. That person is sealed behind iron. What walks out of the Tibetan mountains is Dr. Doom, armored, masked, sorcery and science braided together into something that has very few natural predators. He goes back to Latveria, and that's a whole other story, which we'll get to. But first, I want to stay with the mask for a moment, because I think it's worth understanding what it actually represents. It's not just concealment, it's transformation. The mask doesn't hide Victor from the world, so much as it creates a space in which Victor no longer has to exist. Behind the mask, there's no vulnerable child, no failed student, no person who pressed hot iron to his face because he couldn't wait. There's only Doom, which is psychologically a fairly elegant coping mechanism. It's also a form of self-erasure that gets more total over time. The longer the mask stays on, the less Victor is allowed to exist beneath it. Eventually, in the most extreme readings of the character, they become genuinely inseparable. The mask is not a thing Doom wears, it's a thing that Doom is. John Byrne, who wrote and drew Fantastic Four for 6 years, starting in 1981, and is responsible for a lot of the character's modern interpretation, made a specific decision that only Doom's robot servants are allowed to see him without the mask. Not allies, not trusted generals, not anyone from his inner circle, only machines who cannot judge or pity him, because those are the only witnesses Doom can tolerate. There's something genuinely sad about that if you let yourself sit with it. A man so afraid of being seen that he'll only remove his mask in front of things that can't see. But Doom doesn't traffic in sadness, or at least he refuses to acknowledge it, and so the mask stays on, and the world sees only the iron face, and the armor hums with enough power to dissuade anyone from looking too closely. Now, he has the origin, he has the mask, he has the science and the sorcery. Let's talk about what makes him actually different from every other powerful armored genius in the Marvel Universe, because the combination is genuinely unusual, and it's not as simple as he's smart and also magic. The Marvel Universe has a fairly clear line between its science heroes and its magic heroes, and most characters are on one side of it. Reed Richards, Tony Stark, Bruce Banner. These are scientists. Their powers come from technology and accident, and they tend to regard the supernatural with polite skepticism or outright hostility. On the other side, Doctor Strange, the Scarlet Witch, Loki. These are practitioners of the mystic arts, and while some of them have academic minds, their primary toolkit is not engineering. Victor Von Doom refuses this division, and not just because he happens to have skills in both areas. He refuses it philosophically. To Doom, magic is not a separate category of reality. It's an undocumented branch of physics. Ritual is the scientific method spoken in older tongues. The spells his mother practiced, the incantations he learned in Tibet, the enchantments woven into his armor. These are not mystical in the sense of being beyond understanding. They're just science that hasn't been adequately theorized yet. This is actually a reasonably interesting philosophical position, and not entirely without precedent in the real world. Early alchemists thought they were doing chemistry. Early astronomers thought they were doing astrology. The line between documented science and things that work but we don't know why yet has always been more permeable than the Academy tends to admit. For Doom, the practical effect of this worldview is that he attacks both domains with the same systematic intensity. He doesn't just pick up a few useful spells the way a scientist might take a first aid course. He goes deep into both traditions, mastering them separately and then integrating them in ways that create genuinely novel capabilities. His armor is the most obvious expression of this. The engineering inside the suit, life support, force fields, weapon systems, the network that controls his Doombots, is centuries ahead of anything else in the Marvel Universe by most assessments. But the armor is also covered in mystic wards and enchantments, woven in during forging and continuously maintained. The tech handles physical threats. The enchantments handle supernatural ones. If you're a demon, your infernal energies dissipate against the wards before they reach the metal. If you're a soldier with a railgun, the force fields absorb it before it reaches the wards. It's defensive redundancy of a very sophisticated kind, and it's why taking Doom down in a fight tends to require an absurd amount of effort, even from characters who individually outpower him in either domain. The Doombots are their own fascinating chapter. Victor builds them as copies of himself, mechanized replicas of sufficient quality that, in combat, even experienced heroes have been genuinely uncertain whether they're fighting the real Doom or one of his proxies. He controls them through a combination of advanced AI systems and, in some accounts, actual mystic links. The uncertainty this creates is tactical genius. If you can never be sure whether you're fighting Doom or a proxy, you can never fully commit to a finishing blow, and the real Doom remains perpetually insulated. His castle in Latveria, as described in various runs, is a place where centuries coexist without apparent friction. Quantum computing systems alongside candlelit altars, hidden passages lined with surveillance technology alongside summoning circles carved into ancient stone. It's a place where a 31st century laboratory and a 14th century sanctum somehow occupy the same physical space, and Doom moves between them without finding anything unusual about the arrangement. The mystic feats are worth cataloging because they're genuinely impressive by Marvel's standards. Doom has siphoned the life force from the Scarlet Witch, who is one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel universe by any measure. He has stolen the power cosmic, the energy that powers the Silver Surfer, more than once. He has repeatedly confronted Mephisto, who is a demonic entity of enormous power, in direct supernatural combat, specifically over the issue of his mother's soul. That last point is worth dwelling on for a moment, because it says something about who Doom actually is beneath the political machinations and cosmic ambitions. He keeps going back to Mephisto, not for power, not for advantage, specifically to try to free his mother. He doesn't always succeed, but he always goes back. And while Mephisto is the devil and not exactly a reliable narrator, even he seems to find Victor a genuinely exceptional adversary. The comparison to Doctor Strange often comes up, and it's a fair one to address. Strange is the Sorcerer Supreme, the most skilled human practitioner of the mystic arts in the main Marvel timeline. Doom is not the Sorcerer Supreme. Strange is generally credited as the superior pure sorcerer. But Doom doesn't need to be the best at magic alone, because he's also one of the best engineers alive. The combination produces something that neither Strange nor any of the science heroes can fully replicate, and it puts Doom in a category that has very few members. The Mephisto relationship deserves a proper mention in this section because it's where Doom's mystic capabilities get their most personal application. Mephisto is not a villain Doom fights because of some political grievance or territorial dispute. Mephisto is the entity who has Doom's mother. Cynthia Von Doom's soul is in his realm, claimed under the terms of that catastrophically backfired bargain, and Doom, across decades of comics and countless other crises and adventures, keeps going back. Not once, not twice. He has confronted Mephisto in direct supernatural combat on multiple occasions, each time specifically trying to either retrieve his mother outright or at least achieve some form of contact with her, some confirmation that she exists and that he hasn't forgotten her. He doesn't always succeed in the way he hopes. Mephisto is extraordinarily powerful in his own domain, and the rules of demonic bargaining are not particularly friendly to the person doing the bargaining. But Doom wins often enough and survives every encounter, which is more than most Marvel characters can claim after a single meeting with Mephisto. There's a storyline, the Triumph and Torment arc, which is often cited as one of the definitive Doom stories, where he teams up with Doctor Strange specifically to descend into Mephisto's realm and free his mother's soul permanently. He succeeds. Cynthia Von Doom is released. It's a beautiful piece of comics writing because it gives Doom what he's always wanted and doesn't let that be the end of his story. He saves his mother, and he is still Doom. The grief that powered him for so long is addressed, but the person that grief built doesn't simply dissolve once the wound is healed. He spent too long being this version of himself. The armor has been on too long. The psychology is too deeply set. And so he goes back to Latveria, back to the throne, back to the endless chess match with Richards and the Avengers and the larger universe, because what else would he do? Reed Richards is, by some assessments, smarter than Doom in the pure IQ sense. Tony Stark builds armor that's argued to be comparable or superior in specific technical domains. Strange is a more disciplined and probably more powerful sorcerer, but none of them can do all three: the engineering, the sorcery, and the governing of an actual country while doing it, and that gap is enormous. More on governing, as it happens, in the next section. Victor returns to Latveria at some point after his time in Tibet. The exact timing varies somewhat depending on which continuity you're reading, and he takes it, not in a loud, chaotic way. He walks into the palace, he removes the ruling baron and his lieutenants from power, he installs himself as the sovereign, and Latveria simply becomes his. The people who stood by while his father froze to death now answer to Werner von Doom's son. The country that branded his mother's legacy as corruption now runs on his schedule. There's something satisfying about this that the comics neither entirely endorse nor entirely condemn, and I think that ambiguity is intentional. What happens next is where Doom gets genuinely complicated, and where the "but is he actually the villain" conversation tends to start. Doom actually governs. He modernizes Latveria's agriculture with technology that eliminates the possibility of famine. He builds what amounts to a universal healthcare system, staffed partly by medical technology decades ahead of anything available in Western Europe. He constructs infrastructure. He manages the country's defenses, physical and supernatural, because Latveria apparently does have actual demonic threats at its borders, which puts a slightly different frame on the idea of mystical wards around the country. Under Doom, crime in Latveria becomes essentially non-existent, enforced by surveillance and a justice system with zero tolerance. Poverty, by all comic accounts, ceases to be a significant problem. Disease becomes manageable in ways it wasn't before. The quality of life for ordinary Latverians, the farmers, the tradespeople, the children, the elderly, improves dramatically by any metric you want to apply. The outside world brands him a tyrant. Foreign governments fund rebel groups. Superheroes occasionally turn up to liberate the Latverians from their oppressive ruler. And then there's the recurring bit, across multiple runs and multiple decades of comics, where the Latverians wait for the heroes to leave and then essentially request Doom's return, because chaos in the name of freedom is, and the comics make this point without flinching, genuinely terrifying when you've grown up in poverty, when you've watched your parents go hungry, when you remember what life was like before the machines tilled the fields and the clinics opened. I don't think the comics are endorsing authoritarianism when they write these sequences. I think they're being honest about a question that political philosophy has wrestled with for centuries. What do people actually want from their government, and is the liberal democratic framework the only legitimate answer? Doom's Latveria suggests a different arrangement, one where security and competence are traded for freedom and self-determination, and the Latverians, in the fiction, mostly choose security. My honest take on this: I find Doom's governance genuinely uncomfortable to engage with precisely because it works, within the fiction, in ways that expose the gap between the ideals of liberal democracy and its actual delivery for ordinary people. That discomfort is almost certainly the point. Treason in Latveria carries severe consequences. Doom doesn't forgive betrayal and doesn't pretend otherwise. His laws are harsh and enforced absolutely. But within those parameters, he protects his people with everything he has, including facing down actual supernatural entities that cross his borders. There's a sequence in various runs where demons are driven back from Latverian villages, not by armies, but by Doom personally, alone. because that's the kind of sovereign he is. One detail that always gets me is Valeria Richards. In the Secret Wars continuity, we'll get to Secret Wars properly in a bit, Doom takes Reed Richards' wife, takes his children, and raises Franklin and Valeria as his own. But in the main timeline, Doom becomes the godfather to Valeria Richards, Reed and Sue's daughter. She's named, in some versions, for his mother. He's a difficult godfather, not warm in any conventional sense, but he's there, and that gesture, choosing to be present in that child's life, giving her a name connected to the person he most failed to protect, says things about Victor that he would never say himself. There's also the matter of how Doom handles foreign interference, which is another dimension of the governance question that's worth exploring. Doom doesn't simply defend Latveria from outside threats. He actively projects power outward when Latverian interests are threatened, or when he believes the threat to Latveria is better addressed before it reaches his borders. This is, by most international law standards, aggression. By Doom standards, it's simply effective governance. His diplomatic immunity as a head of state protects him from most conventional legal consequences, which is a detail the comics explore with some relish. The image of Tony Stark or Captain America wanting to arrest Doom and being told, essentially, that he has sovereign immunity. The citizens of Latveria exist in a relationship with Doom that has no exact real-world equivalent. They're not free in the way that citizens of liberal democracies are free. Their choices are constrained, their dissent is not tolerated, their media is controlled. But they are genuinely cared for in the material sense, fed, housed, medically treated, protected from both conventional and supernatural harm. Generations have grown up in this arrangement. For them, Doom is not a usurper or a conqueror. He's the permanent fact of their world, reliable in ways that most political arrangements are not. There's a recurring detail in various runs where visitors to Latveria, journalists, foreign diplomats, heroes arriving to investigate alleged abuses, find a country that is, by observable metrics, thriving. They find no famine, no crumbling infrastructure, no visible poverty. What they find instead is a population that appears to genuinely prefer things as they are, which is uncomfortable for the visitor to sit with. The abuses that authoritarian rule usually generates in reality, the corruption, the misery, the fear, are largely absent, because Doom runs his kingdom with the same perfectionism he brings to everything else. He will not tolerate incompetent administration any more than he would tolerate a flawed equation. Now, none of this exists in isolation from the one relationship that defines Doom more than any other. We've been circling it. Let's go directly there. Doom hates Reed Richards with a specificity and intensity that distinguishes it from simple rivalry. It's not quite competition, though it's that too. It's not quite jealousy, though there are elements of that as well. It's something more particular and more painful than either of those words suggests. Reed Richards is the living proof that Doom could have been wrong, and Doom cannot bear that. Let's go back to ESU. Victor builds the machine. Reed notices a flaw in the calculations and tries to warn him. The machine explodes. Victor's face is scarred. In some versions, the flaw Reed identified was real, and the explosion could have been prevented. In others, there were multiple problems, and Reed's warning was only partial. But in all versions, Victor doesn't take the feedback, the machine fails, and the failure leaves a mark. If Victor had listened to Reed, there's probably no accident, no scar, no mask, no armor, no Doom. Victor cannot accept this. Or rather, he accepts it in the sense of knowing it intellectually, and rejects it completely in the sense of what he's willing to let himself feel about it. Because if Reed was right, then Victor was wrong. And if Victor was wrong, then the explosion was his fault. And if the explosion was his fault, then everything that followed, the expulsion, the exile, the mask, the years of war against the Fantastic Four, the literal decades of his life spent in an iron suit, all of that is a consequence of a mistake he made in a dorm room when he was a university student. That's an unbearable thing to hold. So Reed is blamed instead, and the blame hardens into something that persists across timelines and realities, which is really saying something. Every iteration of the Marvel Universe that features both characters seems to find them orbiting each other, heroes and tyrants, scientists and monarchs, the person who learned to be humble and the person who decided that humility was for people without his abilities. They turn up in each other's stories over and over, sometimes as enemies, occasionally as reluctant allies, and there's always this undercurrent of what might have been if either of them had been slightly different. The rare team-ups are the most revealing moments. During Onslaught, during the build-up to the Secret Wars, when something is genuinely catastrophic, Doom and Richard sometimes fight on the same side. And in those moments, the comics show you something extraordinary. The glimpse of what these two minds could actually accomplish together. It's almost always described, within the story, as astonishing. Heroes who've been fighting villains their whole careers go quiet when they see Doom and Richards working toward the same goal. And then it ends. Because it always ends. Because Doom cannot sustain cooperation with a man whose mere existence is a rebuke. The John Byrne run of the 1980s gave the rivalry some of its most interesting texture. Byrne's Doom is a man of genuine honor. He doesn't break his word. He doesn't harm innocents without purpose. He observes a code of conduct that makes him more dangerous in some ways because it's consistent. You know where you stand with him. But the Byrne-Doom's relationship with Richards is particularly layered, because Byrne was interested in the question of what Doom would be without the grudge. Whether there's a version of this person who could have been something genuinely admirable rather than something genuinely terrible. Mark Waid's later run pushed in a darker direction, showing Doom sacrificing things, including Valeria, his first love in some continuities, bargained to demons for power that undermine the idea of his honor. The argument Waid's work seems to be making is that Doom's code is real, but it's ultimately subordinate to his ambition. And when ambition and honor conflict, ambition wins. This is a less sympathetic reading than Byrne's, and probably closer to the character's actual center of gravity. What both runs agree on, and what the character has consistently maintained across all its interpretations, is that Reed Richards is the one relationship that never resolves. Other enemies come and go. Other alliances are made and broken. But Doom and Richards circle each other through every era of Marvel publishing, through every creative team, through every cosmic upheaval and status quo reset. The grudge outlasts everything else. In some sense, it is Doom, the wound that generated him, maintained as the thing that keeps the armor necessary. In Secret Wars, which we'll discuss properly in the next few sections, Doom achieves something genuinely unprecedented. He saves the multiverse, or at least the remnants of it, using stolen omnipotence and extraordinary will. And in doing so, he takes Reed Richards' wife, his children, his family, his life. He installs himself in that life and rules the new reality as God Emperor. He gives himself everything Reed had, plus omnipotence. The thing this reveals about Doom, underneath all the cosmic power and political theory, is that he wanted what Reed had, not the intelligence, He already has that. Not the influence. He already has more of it. He wanted the warmth, the family, the sense of being genuinely loved rather than feared or served or useful. And the fact that he could only claim those things by stealing them, and the fact that even then they weren't really his, is probably the most tragic thing about him. The final confrontation in Secret Wars 2015 ends with Doom admitting that Reed would have done better with the godhood than Doom did. And the Molecule Man, who is effectively the arbiter of that scene, agrees and gives the power to Reed instead. Doom's defeat in that story is not military. It's not even tactical. It's an admission, the most honest thing he ever says in the comics, that someone else was better suited for the job, and it costs him everything he'd built. I find this genuinely moving as villain stories go. The man who built a universe because he couldn't admit he was wrong in a university dorm room, finally, in the rubble of that universe, admitting it. 60 years too late, at enormous cost to everyone including himself. The original Secret Wars, written by Jim Shooter with art by Mike Zeck and Bob Layton, came out in 1984, and it was one of the first major crossover events in Marvel history. The premise is fairly straightforward in the way that enormously consequential premises sometimes are. A cosmic entity called the Beyonder, singular, capital B, immensely powerful, plucks a collection of heroes and villains from Earth and deposits them on a constructed world called Battle World to fight each other. The winner gets their heart's desire. Doom is placed among the villains. The heroes include the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man. Everyone's supposed to fight. That's the arrangement. Doom looks at the arrangement and decides it's beneath him. This is, honestly, the most Doom response possible to being dropped into a cosmic combat tournament. He doesn't refuse to fight. He just decides that the real target isn't the heroes, it's the Beyonder. If you can have the thing controlling the game, why bother competing in the game? He constructs a device using the body of a villain called Claw, a sound-based criminal, more than a little unhinged, that can drain and redirect cosmic energy. He targets Galactus, one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, a planet-consuming entity who predates the current version of reality and uses this improvised device to steal the power cosmic, Galactus's power, in Doom's hands now. And then, powered by that, he attacks the Beyonder directly. This works, briefly. Doom drains the Beyonder's omnipotent abilities and becomes, for a period, effectively a god. He heals his face. The scars from the lab accident are gone, for the first time in years. He kills the assembled heroes, then brings them back, because even with all of existence at his command, he finds that wholesale destruction doesn't actually satisfy him. He wants to be acknowledged as superior, not simply to eliminate everyone else. Then Claw starts manipulating Doom's subconscious doubts. Claw is, and I mean this as a description rather than a criticism, deeply weird as a character, and in this context, his unpredictability becomes genuinely dangerous. The power is too vast to hold properly. The Beyonder had apparently been pretending to lose, waiting for exactly this kind of internal fracture, and now reclaims his abilities. The heroes are restored. Doom is reduced again to a man in a suit, not a god. A few things about this worth noting. The fact that Doom's plan in a hero versus villain tournament was to steal omnipotence and kill everyone suggests a certain creative relationship with the stated rules of engagement. His decision to restore the heroes after killing them is interesting. He can't quite commit to being the villain the situation frames him as, because his actual self-image is not destroyer, but superior being who would govern things properly. Killing everyone isn't governance. Most interestingly, the Beyonder wasn't actually defeated. Not really. Doom got extraordinarily close, but wasn't quite equal to the task. He had the power and couldn't hold it. This incompletion matters very much in 2015. It's worth staying with the question of why Doom couldn't hold the power in 1984, because the answer illuminates something important about him. It's not that he was outmatched in any simple sense. The power was real. He used it effectively. But the 1984 Beyonder's omnipotence was described as so total that controlling it required a kind of rest that Doom couldn't afford. A moment of genuine relinquishment, of letting go that the armor doesn't permit. To hold that much power required trusting the universe enough to stop gripping it. And Victor Von Doom does not let go of things. His whole psychology is organized around holding tighter, not releasing. It's almost fitting that the one quality his omnipotence required was the one quality he had trained himself most completely to suppress. The Claw factor is its own interesting wrinkle. Claw is genuinely chaotic in ways that most Marvel villains aren't. He's a villain whose primary characteristic is unpredictability, who operates by instinct and whim, and in the 1984 Secret Wars, he functions as the element that gets through Doom's defenses precisely because Doom can't anticipate him. There's a lesson there about the limits of pure intelligence as a defensive strategy, though Doom, characteristically, probably filed it under tactical oversight to correct, rather than fundamental vulnerability to accept. There are some lovely peripheral details in this story that ripple forward for decades in ways nobody quite anticipated at the time. Spider-Man discovers a machine on Battleworld that can apparently repair his costume, uses it, and comes home with what he thinks is a very stylish new black outfit. It is not an outfit. It is a living symbiote that will eventually become Venom. And the decades of chaos this causes is genuinely impressive for something that started as a minor wardrobe decision. Ben Grimm, the Thing, decides to stay on Battleworld because it has unusual properties that allow him to transform between human and thing forms at will, which he can't do on Earth, and he wants to understand why. She-Hulk temporarily joins the Fantastic Four in his absence. All of these things happen in the margins of Doom stealing the power of God and briefly killing everyone. It's a fairly full event. The 1984 Secret Wars established a template that the 2015 version would use as its foundation and expand dramatically. Doom, faced with a situation that appears to have fixed parameters, finds the largest available power source and attempts to claim it. He nearly succeeds and is brought down not by superior force, but by internal limits. His own psychology, his own inability to fully settle into omnipotence. The lesson he apparently takes from this is not, don't try again, but try better next time, with more preparation. Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars, which ran across 2015 and 2016, is the culmination of years of setup across multiple titles. Hickman had been building toward this event through his runs on Avengers and New Avengers, gradually introducing the concept of incursions, events where two parallel universes literally collide, and at least one of them is destroyed. The multiverse, in this framework, is slowly eating itself, different Earths crashing together until there's very little left. The Beyonders, in this version, are the architects of this destruction, not the same entity as the 1984 Beyonder, but a race of cosmic beings so far outside the normal scale of Marvel power that even the Celestials, who are themselves enormous cosmic entities, barely register to them. The Beyonders have been running what amounts to a millennia-long experiment in multiversal destruction, and the mechanism is elegant in a terrible way. Every version of reality contains a Molecule Man, a single human being whose existence in each universe represents a portion of a vast interdimensional entity. And the Beyonders designed each molecule man as a bomb. Detonate all of them simultaneously, and every universe ends at once. Doom, Doctor Strange, and the Earth 616 molecule man learn this, and they come up with a plan that is so audacious it barely fits inside the genre it's operating in. They gather molecule men from across the multiverse. They build a bomb from these gathered beings and direct the detonation at the Beyonders themselves. They kill the architects of existence, and in the resulting release of power, channeled through the molecule man into Doom, Victor Von Doom reshapes whatever is left. What's left isn't much. The multiverse is essentially gone. A few life rafts survive, including one carrying Reed Richards and a handful of heroes from Earth 616, and one carrying Thanos and his cabal. But the fabric of reality has been destroyed, and what exists now is what Doom makes of it. What he makes of it is Battleworld. Battleworld is a patchwork planet assembled from fragments of destroyed universes, each fragment becoming a domain under Doom's authority. Different parts of this new planet contain remnants of different realities. There's a domain that's a version of the Marvel Zombies universe, one that's a fragment of the 1984 Battleworld, one that's a slice of the Old West, and so on. Doom rules all of it as God Emperor, with Doctor Strange serving as his sheriff and most trusted advisor, and the Thor Corps, an army of Thors drawn from across the multiverse, enforcing his law. He also, in what is either the most revealing or the most petty thing he's ever done, depending on your perspective, installs Susan Von Doom as his wife, Franklin and Valeria as his children. He gives Johnny Storm to the sky, literally. Johnny becomes this new world's sun. He makes Ben Grimm the wall that protects Battleworld's outer edge from the monsters beyond. He takes Reed Richards' entire family and puts himself inside it. The narrator's note on this: it's both power and confession. He didn't want to defeat Reed Richards. He wanted to replace him. He wanted the life, not just the victory over the person living it. And the fact that he does this in a reality where Reed doesn't exist, where Doom has literally remade everything and could have given himself anything, and what he chooses is Reed's family, says more about what Victor Von Doom actually wants than any political manifesto or cosmic ambition. For 8 years, in Storytime, this works. Battleworld functions. Nobody on it remembers the multiverse that existed before. Doom has reshaped memory as thoroughly as he reshaped reality. Billions of people live in this patchwork world, worship Doom as their god, and experience lives of reasonable security under his governance. Which is, given that the alternative was the complete destruction of all existence, not obviously a bad outcome. Then Reed Richards turns up, with Miles Morales, and a hamburger. The hamburger detail is genuinely one of my favorite things in the entirety of Secret Wars, and if you haven't read the run, this might sound absurd, but please stay with me. The Molecule Man, Owen Reese, the key to everything, the living bomb who became the living salvation, has been hiding in a secret chamber beneath Doom's castle this whole time, subsisting on increasingly limited resources. And Miles Morales, wandering through Battleworld with the life raft survivors, stops to share his lunch with the man when he finds him, a simple act of kindness to someone who appears to be a stranger in need. And the Molecule Man remembers that kindness when the moment comes to decide who should receive the power of the Beyonders. He feels he owes Miles a debt, which is how a hamburger tips the scales of the entire multiverse. The confrontation between Doom and Reed, once it arrives, is as good as 60 years of buildup could possibly justify. Doom is partially stripped of his power. The Molecule Man levels the playing field, so it's a genuine fight rather than a foregone conclusion, and they argue as much as they fight. Doom accuses Reed of believing he could have done better with the godhood. Reed says yes, and Doom, and this is the moment that matters, agrees. You would have done better. That's what he says, not bitterly, not as a tactical concession, as an honest acknowledgement. The Molecule Man gives Reed the power. Battleworld dissolves. The multiverse is reconstituted. Reed uses his godhood to restore it rather than rule it, and Doom is left once again as a man in a suit with a kingdom to run. The title, God Emperor Doom, incidentally, comes directly from Frank Herbert's Dune, the series where the messianic figure eventually achieves literally divine rule and finds it hollow. The second issue of Secret Wars is titled Doom Messiah, also from Dune. Hickman wears his influences openly, and the parallel is apt. A figure who achieves absolute power and discovers that absolute power, without being chosen or earned, without the genuine consent of those beneath it, doesn't actually deliver what they wanted. The title, God Emperor Doom, incidentally, comes directly from Frank Herbert's Dune, the series where the messianic figure eventually achieves literally divine rule and finds it hollow. The second issue of Secret Wars is titled Doom Messiah, also from Dune. Hickman wears his influences openly, and the parallel is apt. A figure who achieves absolute power and discovers that absolute power, without being chosen or earned, without the genuine consent of those beneath it, doesn't actually deliver what they wanted. The structure of Battleworld itself is worth describing for a moment, because it's one of those fictional constructions that rewards attention to the details. Each domain of Battleworld is ruled by a baron or baroness appointed by Doom, and each domain contains remnants of a different destroyed reality. The Thor Corps, an army of Thors drawn from across the multiverse, each one genuinely imbued with the power of Thor, enforce Doom's law between domains. Travel between domains requires permission. The shield, at Battleworld's outer edge, is literally made from Ben Grimm, who volunteered to become the wall because the alternatives were worse, and because Ben Grimm is, at heart, a person who puts himself between danger and the people he cares about. Doctor Strange serving as Doom's sheriff is one of the more pointed decisions in the whole run. Strange, who in the main timeline would be Doom's ideological opposite in many ways, the guardian of reality rather than its would-be ruler, here becomes complicit in Doom's order, because Strange was present when Doom saved what was left of reality. Strange knows what the alternative was. He was there when the Beyonders were killed and the world remade. And in that context, Strange serves Doom not from subservience, but from a clear-eyed assessment that Doom's world is better than nothing, and that nothing was very close to what happened. It's a morally uncomfortable position that the comics don't try to resolve, because there isn't a resolution that works. Strange is right that Doom's world is better than Annihilation. Strange is also enabling a totalitarian regime. Both of these things are true at the same time, and Hickman trusts the reader to hold that contradiction without needing the text to adjudicate it. What Doom wanted, stripped of everything else, was to be enough, to be better than the person who witnessed his failure, to prove that the boy in the snow, the student who built the exploding machine, the scarred exile, that person was not the truth of him, and he came so close to proving it. He literally became God for 8 years, and it wasn't enough, because Reed Richards would still have done it better. Dr. Doom has appeared in live-action films 4 times before Robert Downey Jr. put on the mask. and the history of these appearances is a fairly comprehensive study in Hollywood, not understanding what made a character work. Starting at the beginning, there is a Fantastic Four film from 1994 that most people haven't seen, and there are specific reasons for that. It was produced by Roger Corman on a very limited budget, and it was made not with any real intention of releasing it, but to prevent the film rights from lapsing back to Marvel. The cast and crew apparently weren't informed of this arrangement and believed they were making a film that would actually be shown to audiences, which is, genuinely, an unkind thing to do to a group of people who showed up to work every day. Joseph Culp plays Doom in this version, and he's actually in a costume that's reasonably comic accurate. The green cloak, the iron mask, the general silhouette is there. The film itself is what you'd expect from a very low-budget 1994 production shot under false pretenses. But Culp isn't the problem. Then there's the 2005 Fantastic Four directed by Tim Story, with Julian McMahon as Victor Von Doom. This is where things get complicated. McMahon is, actually, a very good actor. He was remarkable in the Ryan Murphy series Nip Tuck, playing a plastic surgeon of considerable moral flexibility with tremendous charm and just the right amount of melodrama. He brought those skills to Dr. Doom and did more with the material than the material probably deserved. The problem is that the material had made fundamental decisions about the character that stripped him of almost everything interesting. This version of Victor Von Doom is a corporate CEO, not a monarch. He gets his powers in the same cosmic storm that creates the Fantastic Four. A convenient origin for the screenplay, but one that removes the entire architecture of the character. No Latveria, no self-taught genius, no mystic arts, no years of exile and transformation. Just a rich man who gets powers and becomes a villain because he's jealous of Reed Richards and irritated at losing money on the space mission. McMahon played this with genuine commitment, and there are moments where you can see the actual Doom trying to surface despite the constraints. But the character on the page wasn't really Doom. He was a corporate villain with a metal face and some electricity powers, and that's not what decades of comics had been building. Julian McMahon died in July of 2025, aged 56. I mention this not to be morbid, but because it seems right to acknowledge it in a video that spends time with his work. He was too young, and he deserved better material than the Fantastic Four films gave him. His take on the character was constrained by the screenplay, but the effort was genuine. The 2007 sequel, Rise of the Silver Surfer, gives Doom a plot that's at least structurally Doomish. He steals the Silver Surfer's board, acquires the power cosmic, briefly becomes very dangerous. The comics did this too, in various forms. But the film had already established a version of the character that didn't quite work, and the sequel couldn't fully recover the deficit. Then there's the 2015 Fantastic Four, directed by Josh Trank, which has become something of a case study in how badly wrong a production can go. Toby Kebbell plays Victor Von Doom, or rather plays a character named Viktor Domashev, a hacker, not a monarch, based at a research foundation rather than ruling a sovereign state. During filming, fan backlash to the name change apparently led to reshoots that changed it back to Von Doom, which tells you something about the production's confidence in its own decisions. Kebbell is, in other contexts, an excellent actor. His work in Planet of the Apes and various other films demonstrates real range and capability. He had nothing to work with here. The design of this Doom, his face when it's eventually revealed, was widely mocked as looking like a melted mannequin. The character's motivation is essentially angry at humanity in general. The film failed critically and commercially, and it stands as probably the most complete failure of the character in any medium. The animated versions of Doom across decades of cartoon adaptations were consistently kinder to the character. The 1967 Fantastic Four cartoon gave him an appropriately menacing presence, even within the constraints of Saturday morning animation. The 1994 animated series, a different production from the Corman film, ran for 2 seasons and is remembered by fans of a certain age as a surprisingly faithful adaptation that gave Doom the gravitas the character deserved. The Earth's Mightiest Heroes series from 2010 to 2012 featured one of the best animated versions of the character, keeping his Latverian sovereignty intact and allowing his interactions with the Avengers and the Fantastic Four to have genuine weight. The X-Men 97 Revival series, which came out in 2024, included a brief but well-handled appearance, voiced by Ross Marquand. Just enough to remind audiences what a properly handled animated Doom looks like before the MCU version arrived. The animated consistency compared to the live-action inconsistency is interesting to think about. Animation doesn't require the same compromises that live-action mainstream filmmaking often imposes. You can have a character rule a country without needing to build Latveria as a physical location. You can have a character practice sorcery without it looking silly next to practical effects. You can write Doom as genuinely formidable without a runtime concern that the hero needs to be able to beat him by the 3rd act. The medium was, in some ways, better suited to what the character required. The interesting thing looking back is that every film adaptation made essentially the same error. They tried to make Doom comprehensible by reducing him. They took away the monarchy because a sovereign state felt difficult to establish in a 1st act. They took away the sorcery because the science was easier to film. They took away the genuine political complexity because a character who governs effectively and still believes in absolute authority was too uncomfortable a position to let the villain occupy without immediate refutation. And in doing all of that, they removed everything that made him interesting. Doom works at full scale, or he doesn't work at all. A diminished Doom is just a man in a suit being rude to Reed Richards, and there's not much story in that. The context for what happened at San Diego Comic-Con in July 2024 requires a bit of setup, because the announcement was so surprising that it's easy to forget how badly things had been going. For years, Marvel had been building toward Avengers, the Kang Dynasty, as the conclusion of what they called the Multiverse Saga. Jonathan Majors was playing Kang the Conqueror across multiple projects. He appeared in Loki, in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and was set to be the central villain of the 2 Avengers films that would close out the Multiverse Saga. In December 2023, Majors was found guilty of harassment and assault of a former girlfriend. Disney and Marvel cut ties with him essentially immediately. The entire villain plan for the conclusion of a multi-film, multi-year saga had to be replaced, with no obvious candidate waiting in the wings, while scripts were being written and production was being planned. It is difficult to overstate how disruptive this was from a storytelling perspective. Marvel and the production teams spent the first half of 2024 reworking everything. There were reports that they were considering various directions, including leaning more heavily into Doctor Doom as a villain, a character who had always been expected to show up eventually but hadn't been formally integrated into the MCU. Then Kevin Feige reportedly sat down with Robert Downey Jr., who had retired from the role of Tony Stark after Endgame in 2019. The pitch, as Downey has described it, was unusually direct. Feige told him that it kept occurring to him that if Downey were to come back, the studio didn't want to go backwards. Not a return to Tony Stark, not a resurrection or a clone or a flashback. They wanted to continue forward, They wanted to surprise people. They offered him Victor Von Doom. What Feige understood, and what turned out to be correct, is that using Robert Downey Jr. to play Dr. Doom creates a specific kind of narrative electricity that no new actor could generate. The audience spent over a decade watching this face as the hero of the franchise. Having that face return as its greatest antagonist is not just good casting, it's a storytelling statement. The man who built the MCU has come back to break it. The reveal at San Diego Comic-Con 2024 was managed in a way that suggests someone understood exactly how much impact it would have. Kevin Feige announced the return of the Russo brothers as directors, and Stephen McFeely as co-writer, the team behind the Infinity Saga, which was already significant news. He announced the new title, Avengers, Doomsday, not Avengers, the Kang Dynasty. And then he told the Hall H crowd that to do justice to the Secret Wars storyline, they needed to introduce one specific character. And then Robert Downey Jr. walked out, in a suit and cowl in Doom's signature green. The crowd chanted, RDJ, RDJ for quite some time. It was one of those convention moments that functions as genuine cultural news rather than promotional spectacle, which is fairly rare. The context for the Kang situation is worth briefly establishing because it explains why the pivot happened when it did. Jonathan Majors had been set up as the Multiverse Saga's primary antagonist across multiple projects. His appearance in Loki introduced the concept of variance and the sacred timeline collapsing. His appearance in Quantumania established Kang as a direct physical threat. Then, in December 2023, a New York jury found him guilty. Disney cut ties, and suddenly, the entire endgame of the Multiverse Saga needed to be rebuilt. The decision to go to Doom was apparently under consideration before the verdict, with multiple Marvel insiders having already raised the possibility, but the major situation accelerated it into a firm choice. The speed of the pivot, from potential collapse to San Diego Comic-Con triumph, is genuinely impressive from a production standpoint. It required everyone to move quickly and in the same direction, and the result, judged purely by audience reaction, was one of the most successful announcements in modern convention history. Joe Russo, speaking about RDJ's preparation for the role, said, "He is so immersed in it. He is writing backstory, costume ideas. We were on the phone with him this morning," which is exactly what you want to hear about someone taking on Dr. Doom. This is not a character you can approach from the outside. You have to find what's true in him, and that requires a level of investment that the earlier film portrayals, whatever their other merits, didn't quite bring. The reported payday, somewhere around $100 million across the two films, gives you a sense of how seriously Marvel was investing in the return. This isn't a cameo. This isn't a guest appearance. This is Marvel spending significant money to ensure that their final gambit for the Multiverse Saga is as close to bulletproof as possible. Robert Downey Jr.'s actual MCU debut as Doom came before Avengers. Doomsday, in a mid-credits scene at the end of the Fantastic Four First Steps. This was a deliberate choice, and I think it's a smart one. Matt Shakman, who directed First Steps, was quite clear in interviews that he didn't want Dr. Doom as the main villain of the Fantastic Four's debut film. His reasoning was straightforward. The Fantastic Four should get to have their own story, with their own villain, before being pulled into Doom's orbit. In the comics, Doom doesn't appear until Fantastic Four Issue 5. The team had already established themselves as heroes before their most famous nemesis showed up. Shakman wanted to honor that logic. The result is that First Steps has its own antagonist, and Doom is positioned as something waiting just over the horizon, present enough to feel inevitable, not so present that he dominates a film that belongs to Reed, Sue, Johnny, and Ben. It's a good call. The Fantastic Four need to feel like a team before they become Doom's problem. The MCU's Fantastic Four are worth spending a moment on, because the dynamic between Reed Richards and Victor Von Doom is going to define 2 films, and the casting shapes everything about how that dynamic works. Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards brings a particular kind of warmth and genuine decency. He's not a cold scientist. He's someone whose intelligence comes packaged with real emotional investment in the people around him. That quality matters enormously for the Richards-Doom relationship, because what makes Doom interesting is that he can see exactly what Reed has: the warmth, the family, the capacity for connection, and cannot bring himself to simply want it straightforwardly. He has to take it, or pretend he doesn't need it. Facing someone like Pascal's Reed, that wound should be very visible beneath the armor. Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm, Joseph Quinn, who was brilliant in Stranger Things, as Johnny, and Eben Moss-Bachrach as Ben Grimm. A genuinely strong ensemble, and one that had time to establish itself in first steps before being thrown into the larger chaos of Doomsday. This MCU Fantastic Four comes from an alternate universe, a detail that becomes relevant once the multiverse starts properly collapsing, since it means they have a built-in awareness that there are other versions of reality, other versions of themselves, that things they thought were fixed aren't necessarily permanent. The mid-credits scene introducing Doom in First Steps was designed to land as a specific kind of arrival, not "here is a villain," but "here is something different." A quality of presence that distinguishes Doom from anything the MCU had introduced before. Whether RDJ's performance achieves that is the kind of thing audiences can assess for themselves. What the placement in First Steps accomplishes narratively is that by the time Doomsday opens, Doom isn't a stranger. He's been glimpsed. He's been felt. The Fantastic Four already know who he is, or at least know of him, and that history travels into the larger Avengers story in ways that echo the comics, where Doom is first and foremost the Fantastic Four's problem before he becomes everyone's problem. Avengers. Doomsday starts filming at Pinewood Studios in England in April 2025, under the working title Apple Pie 1, which is both charmingly mundane and almost certainly chosen specifically because it gives nothing away. Location filming takes place in England and Bahrain. Filming wraps in September 2025, with additional photography expected in early 2026. The release date, after a delay from an earlier May 2026 slot, is December 18th, 2026. The cast revealed in March 2025 is enormous, and it tells you quite a lot about the scope of what the film is attempting. From the existing MCU roster, Chris Hemsworth as Thor, reportedly the film's second lead after Downey, which is an interesting choice. Thor has always been the Avenger with the most genuinely cosmic scale, and pairing him with Doom suggests the film is operating in that register rather than a street-level one. Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson's Captain America, Sebastian Stan, Paul Rudd, Florence Pugh, David Harbour, Wyatt Russell, Lewis Pullman, Hannah John Kamen from the Thunderbolts. That whole ensemble showing up together is a sign the film is treating them as a proper unit rather than a collection of cameos. Tenoch Huerta Mejia, Simu Liu, Winston Duke, Letitia Wright, and Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, Joseph Quinn, Eben Moss-Bachrach, the Fantastic Four in full, which makes sense given that the Fantastic Four are, in the comics, Doom's primary concern before he becomes anyone else's, and then, rather remarkably, the X-Men. Patrick Stewart as Professor Xavier, Ian McKellen as Magneto, Kelsey Grammer as Beast, Alan Cumming, Rebecca Romijn, James Marsden, Channing Tatum, finally, as Gambit, a casting that was announced and canceled, and announced again across something like 15 years before this film apparently made it actually happen. I'll be honest, the Gambit thing alone is almost enough to justify the whole production. The X-Men presence is genuinely surprising and also completely logical once you think about it in the context of the multiverse. These actors played these characters in the Fox X-Men films, which are now their own distinct universe within the larger Marvel multiverse. Bringing them into a film about multiverse collapse doesn't require retconning anything. It just requires the multiverse to do what multiverses do, which is collide. There's a report that Doctor Strange allies with Doom in this film, believing that whatever Doom is planning is the only viable option to address the multiverse threat. This is, as I mentioned when talking about Battleworld, not actually out of character for Strange. In the comics, he served as Doom's closest advisor on Battleworld. The idea that Strange would be pragmatic enough to cooperate with Doom when the alternative is worse is consistent with who Strange has always been. Alan Silvestri is composing. He did Infinity War and Endgame, among many others, and his presence suggests a certain continuity of register with those films. Jeffrey Ford is editing, also returning from previous MCU work. Early box office tracking describes Doomsday as predicted to be 2026's highest-grossing film, which is saying something given the general competition. The scale of anticipation for this project is genuinely unusual even by Marvel standards, partly because of RDJ, partly because of the X-Men, partly because the Russo brothers represent a specific period of MCU filmmaking that the audience associates with the franchise at its most ambitious. Kevin Feige, in the lead-up to production, was described as being solely focused on Doomsday and Secret Wars in a way that echoed how he ran the Infinity Saga, paying attention to these two films specifically rather than spreading his attention across the broader slate, which is either a very good sign or simply a reflection of how much is riding on this particular pair of films. The thematic logic of casting Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom is so clean that it almost feels too good, the kind of thing you'd describe in a pitch meeting and then assume they'd say was too clever, too on the nose, too much of a knowing wink to actually execute. Tony Stark and Victor Von Doom have been parallel figures in the comics for decades. Both are genius engineers who build powered armor. Both are arrogant. Both carry enormous amounts of guilt about people they couldn't save. Both have a tendency toward unilateral action that everyone else regards as dangerous. The differences are real and significant, but they're differences of direction rather than origin. The same starting material processed by different experiences and different choices. Tony Stark's arc in the MCU, across 11 years and roughly a dozen films, was fundamentally about learning humility. The man who introduced himself as Iron Man because he couldn't imagine a world that deserved to know his secrets gradually became someone who could lay down his life for a universe full of people he'd never meet. His arc goes from I am Iron Man as a statement of ego to I am Iron Man as a statement of sacrifice. It's a complete story. It has a genuine ending. Victor Von Doom's arc, as a character, is about the refusal of that journey. He has every capability that Tony Stark has: the intelligence, the resources, the engineering mind, the acute awareness of his own brilliance. He even has better reasons for the armor, arguably. Tony made a suit to escape captivity. Victor made a suit to make himself impervious to a world that had already killed the two people he loved most. And yet instead of that trauma producing humility and connection, it produced perfect isolation. He armored himself against feeling as thoroughly as he armored himself against weapons fire. Having Robert Downey Jr. play both figures in the same fictional universe is, in the most literal sense, the same face making opposite choices. the audience has 11 years of emotional investment in this face as heroic. The challenge now is to activate that investment in a completely different direction, not nostalgia, but unease, not comfort, but a kind of creeping recognition that the qualities we admired in Tony Stark, taken slightly wrong, produce something genuinely terrifying. It helps enormously that Doom and Iron Man share a design language. Both are men in metal suits with glowing power sources. When Doom walks into a room in full armor, there's a visual echo of every Iron Man entrance the audience has seen. That echo is uncomfortable in a way that's productive for the story. It suggests continuity where there isn't any, implies familiarity with something that should feel foreign. Joe Russo's description of Downey's preparation for the role is worth sitting with. Writing backstory, developing costume ideas, being immersed in the character before cameras ever roll. This is someone who understands that Doom cannot be approached from the surface. The surface of Doom is iron, literally. The interesting material is underneath, and getting to it requires the kind of preparation that turns a performance into something more than a villain turn. There's also something interesting in the structural positioning. Doom appears first in the Fantastic Four film, Reed Richards' film. The character who will eventually threaten everything the Avengers have built is introduced in the context of his primary rivalry, his foundational relationship, the mirror that reflects his most honest self. Before he becomes the MCU's ultimate antagonist, he's Reed Richards' problem. That ordering matters. It means that when the Avengers eventually face him, the audience already understands what Doom is in the most human sense. Not just a threat, but a person with a history, a wound, a specific name for the thing he can't forgive. And that ultimately is what makes this casting work beyond the clever symbolism. Robert Downey Jr. can play a person who is genuinely brilliant and genuinely broken in ways that coexist without resolving. He did it with Tony Stark for a decade. He can do it with Victor Von Doom for however long the character needs. The character deserves an actor who treats the psychology as seriously as the spectacle. And from everything we can observe about the preparation, that's what this is. The question of whether the MCU will actually let Doom be Doom, will let him govern effectively, will let his methods be genuinely complicated, will resist the pressure to make him straightforwardly evil in ways the audience can comfortably dismiss, is the more interesting one. The casting is right. The question is whether the storytelling will be brave enough to match it. Avengers: Secret Wars starts filming in mid-2026 and releases in December 2027, roughly a year after Doomsday. The two films are positioned as a pair in the way that Infinity War and Endgame were positioned as a pair. The first film presumably disrupting the existing order, the second film dealing with the consequences. Beyond that, almost nothing is confirmed about Secret Wars specifically, which means this section is unavoidably speculation. Pleasantly informed speculation, hopefully, but speculation nonetheless. The 2015 Secret Wars comics are the most obvious template, and the MCU has spent several years building the infrastructure that version of the story requires. The multiverse is already destabilized through Loki's interference with the sacred timeline, through Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, through the events of Spider-Man: No Way Home. Different universes have already been leaking into each other. The concept of incursions, where universes collide, has been seeded. What the MCU hasn't yet fully established is the Beyonders, the cosmic architects whose omnipotence the comics version of Doom needed to steal. This is probably the most significant structural difference between what the MCU has available and what the comics did. The Beyonders in 2015 came with decades of Marvel cosmic mythology behind them, and they don't have an obvious MCU equivalent yet. The question of what or who fills that role in the film version is genuinely interesting. One possibility is that Doom himself becomes the architect of the multiverse's collapse, that he engineers it rather than stops it, or that he does both, using the instability that others created as the raw material for something else entirely. This would be the most Doomish interpretation. Not responding to a crisis, but creating the conditions in which a crisis becomes useful to his plans. The X-Men's presence in Doomsday strongly implies that Battleworld, if the MCU does its own version of it, will include fragments of different universes. The Fox X-Men universe, the universe of the MCU proper, perhaps others. This is both logistically sensible. It lets the studio integrate characters from different franchises without requiring a complete continuity transplant, and narratively interesting because it would give Doom's Battleworld the same patchwork quality it has in the comics, a physical expression of what happens when one mind tries to hold too many realities together. The Reed Richards question is central. Pedro Pascal's Reed is almost certainly a major player in Secret Wars, because in the comics he's the one who ultimately undoes Doom's Battleworld, not through force, but through the same honest acknowledgement that we discussed, the Molecule Man transferring power to the person who would use it better. Whether the film does something structurally similar, whether it inverts this, whether it finds a third option, that's the story we can't know yet. Chris Evans reportedly returns in some capacity. The soft reboot language that Kevin Feige has used in interviews, the idea that Secret Wars will allow Marvel to keep what's working and discard what isn't, suggests that the aftermath of this event will look different from what came before in ways that are fairly significant. Some characters will presumably not survive. Others who were gone, dead, retired from other universes will presumably continue into whatever comes next. My genuinely held hope, for what it's worth, is that the MCU gives Doom the Battleworld sequence properly, that at some point in Secret Wars, we get to see Doom having actually remade reality, ruling it, governing it, holding it together with his iron will while the heroes work out how to reach him. The God Emperor moment, the God Emperor aesthetic, the uncanny spectacle of a world where Doom won completely, and it's actually functional. Because that's the moment that makes the eventual resolution land with real weight. The horror has to be that it worked, not just that he tried. Whatever Secret Wars becomes, the structural decision to run it as a two-film conclusion rather than trying to compress everything into a single film suggests that Marvel is genuinely committed to doing this at scale. The pieces are there. The question is whether the storytelling can assemble them in a way that honors the source material while still being its own thing. That balance is genuinely difficult. The best version of this would probably surprise even the people who've read all the comics by finding something true in the character and the story that the comics themselves approached but didn't quite reach. The worst version would be a spectacular-looking film that resolves its biggest ideas too quickly because the genre demands a certain kind of hero's victory by the end credits. The middle option, which is probably the most likely, would still be worth watching. Because even a compromised version of this story has Robert Downey Jr. in iron armor, playing the most complicated villain Marvel has ever attempted to put on a cinema screen. And that, whatever else is true, is something I've been waiting for longer than I can quite remember. One element I keep thinking about is the question of who, in the MCU's version, gets the Molecule Man role. the figure who functions as the key to transferring ultimate power. The comics version of Owen Reese is a character with a very specific decades-long history, and he hasn't been established in the MCU. Something or someone has to fill that structural function in the story, because the mechanic of Doom holds the power, but someone else could use it better, is the emotional core of the resolution. Whether the MCU invents a new character for this, borrows from an existing one, or finds a completely different structural solution to the same narrative problem, is one of the more interesting open questions. There's also the matter of what comes after. Feige has spoken about Secret Wars as something like a soft reboot, a chance to reset certain elements of the MCU while preserving others. This implies that some characters we know won't survive the event, and some characters we think are gone will return in the aftermath. The question of who falls into which category is, obviously, the most spoiler-adjacent territory I can approach in this video, so I'll leave it there. But the framing of Secret Wars as a genuine transition point, rather than just a very large fight, suggests that whatever emerges from it will look different from what we've had for the past 15 years, which is, honestly, probably necessary for the franchise's long-term health, quite apart from whether Doom wins or loses. There's a version of this conversation that stays entirely within the comics, issues and runs and character moments and creative teams, but I find myself wanting to spend a bit of time with what Dr. Doom actually represents as a cultural artifact, because I think it's interesting, and it doesn't get talked about enough. Doom endures, not just in the sense that he keeps appearing, though he does. He's been in continuous publication since 1962, with very few gaps. He endures in the sense that each generation of readers and writers finds something in him that feels relevant to their moment. The character absorbs new meanings without losing the old ones, which is what distinguishes the truly durable fictional figures from the merely popular ones. In the 1960s, he arrived as the anti-hero of the Cold War era, a European monarch with his own nuclear arsenal and his own foreign policy, existing outside the logic of either American idealism or Soviet communism, answering to nobody. In the 1970s, when Marvel expanded his title appearances, he became more explicitly a critique of unchecked authority, a figure whose competence was inseparable from his totalitarianism. In the 1980s, John Byrne's celebrated run introduced the version of Doom as a man of honor. Ruthless, yes, absolute in his authority, yes, but someone who does not break his word and does not harm innocents without purpose. This made him considerably more interesting than a cartoon tyrant. Later runs, Wade, Hickman, dug into the psychological architecture more deliberately, finding in Doom's obsession with Reed Richards and his unending campaign to free his mother, a character who was essentially defined by irresolvable grief. A person who had decided that the only acceptable response to an unbearable loss was to become powerful enough that no such loss could ever happen again, and who had pursued that goal so completely that the goal had become the person. The contemporary resonance is its own uncomfortable thing, and connects back to what we discussed with Latveria. That same discomfort of a character who is genuinely competent at the thing most governments demonstrably aren't. The comics never resolve that tension, and I think that's right. Doom is also, and this isn't unrelated to the governance question, fundamentally a character about the relationship between intelligence and morality. The assumption in a lot of heroic fiction is that being very smart eventually produces being good, that wisdom is a natural consequence of enough intelligence. Tony Stark's arc more or less follows this logic. The genius starts selfish, learns empathy through suffering, becomes a better person. Doom refuses this arc. He is genuinely, extraordinarily intelligent, and the intelligence has not made him better. It's made him more effective, which is not the same thing. There's a version of this reading where Doom is a warning. Look what happens when brilliance is allowed to proceed without humility. Look where pure capability leads when it's not balanced by compassion. And that reading is certainly in the text, but there's another reading sitting alongside it where the character is something rarer. An honest portrayal of a certain kind of person who exists in the real world, who is brilliant and wounded, and convinced that their wounds explain their methods, and who is correct about the first two things, even if the third is catastrophically wrong. The Romani identity is another element that doesn't get discussed enough in the broader cultural conversation about Doom. Victor von Doom is a Romani man who grew up under persecution in a country that had historically marginalized his people, who became so powerful that the country itself is now named after his family. The specific texture of his background, the Zahiro clan, the generations of displacement and contempt, the father who was a healer without resources, and a mother who turned to the supernatural because conventional power was entirely unavailable to her, isn't incidental to who Doom is. It's foundational. There's a line of thinking that suggests Doom's absolutism is, in part, a response to having grown up in a world where the alternative to power was complete vulnerability. Not theoretical vulnerability, actual, observed, experienced vulnerability that killed both his parents. When you've seen what happens to people who lack power in a world that doesn't particularly care about them, the idea of accumulating enough power that this can never happen again takes on a specific weight that's different from ordinary ambition. The best Doctor Doom stories are the ones that don't try to adjudicate between these readings. They just let both be true simultaneously and trust the reader to hold the tension. Since we're talking about the Multiverse Saga and alternate realities, it seems worth spending a bit of time on the various alternate versions of Doom that the comics have explored over the years, because some of them are genuinely fascinating thought experiments. The most famous alternate is probably Iron Man Doom, the version where Victor Von Doom ends up as Tony Stark's successor in the Iron Man armor rather than building his own suit. This version appeared during a period when Tony Stark was temporarily out of commission, and it's an interesting character study. Doom in the role of hero, or at least in the role of the person wearing the armor, is not actually that different from Doom in the role of monarch. He's still efficient, still impatient with incompetence, still operating from a position of assumed superiority. He's just now technically on the side of the angels, and the distinction clearly bothers him somewhat. There's also Sorcerer Supreme Doom, the version where Victor pursues the mystic arts exclusively and claims the title that Doctor Strange holds in the main timeline. In these stories, Doom's approach to sorcery is inevitably more systematic and more aggressive than Strange's, which creates a different kind of Sorcerer Supreme, less interested in defending the status quo, more interested in actively reshaping magical reality. Whether this is better or worse for the universe depends entirely on Doom's intentions in any given story. The various Doom rules everything storylines are their own category. There's a storyline where Doom uses a device that amplifies the Purple Man's mind control powers to a global scale and legally, through genuine international political process, has himself declared Emperor of Earth. Under this arrangement, war ends, hunger ends, economic inequality collapses. He's done it, the thing he always wanted. And within a relatively short time, he finds the victory hollow, because no one chose it. Nobody in the world is thriving because of their own choices or because of genuine governance. They're thriving because Doom told them to. The absence of challenge, the absence of anyone being able to meaningfully disagree with him, makes the whole thing feel empty in a way he wasn't expecting. He eventually dismantles it. This storyline, more than almost any other, illustrates what Doom actually wants, which is not universal submission. It's recognition. He wants the world to acknowledge, with full access to alternatives, that he is the best option. Forced compliance provides no satisfaction because it cannot produce genuine acknowledgement. He needs the world to have chosen him, and the world keeps choosing other things. There's also the Doom, who becomes a genuinely admirable figure in certain alternate futures, the versions where he outlives the Grudge, where Reed Richards is long dead and Doom rules without that particular wound driving every decision, and the result is something actually functioning. A sovereign who governs excellently, who keeps his kingdom safe and his people fed, who has no one left to compete with, and has finally settled into simple competence. These versions are interesting because they suggest that the worst of Doom is not intrinsic to who he is, but is specifically a product of that one relationship, that one unresolved humiliation. Take away the mirror and the reflection calms. The version of Doom who doesn't make the mask is one of the quieter, sadder alternate takes. In this version, something in the sequence of events is slightly different. Maybe he listens to Reed, maybe the machine doesn't explode, maybe the scar isn't there, and Victor Von Doom becomes simply a scientist, maybe a teacher, a brilliant man who lives a relatively ordinary life, haunted by the sense that he was meant for something larger, but unable to identify what. In some of these stories, he's at peace. In others, he's quietly miserable in ways he can't explain. In all of them, the armor that he didn't build sits as a kind of absence, a gap where a different destiny might have been. The MF Doom connection deserves one more mention in this context, because Daniel Dumail's artistic project was itself a kind of alternate universe Doom story. He took the mask as a symbol of reinvention, of the possibility of becoming someone else entirely, of hiding the self that the world damaged in order to project the self that the world could not damage. His death in 2020 was mourned in ways that superhero characters almost never prompt, partly because the boundary between the real person and the mask had become so productively blurred that losing one felt like losing both. The legacy of MF Doom, alongside the continuing comics presence and now the MCU debut, suggests that the character operates at a frequency that keeps resonating across different media and different contexts, which makes a kind of sense, given that what the character is fundamentally about, the gap between the self you show the world and the self you actually are, the question of how much damage a person can absorb and what they build out of it, are themes that don't expire. The multiverse versions of Doom are, ultimately, a way of exploring the same questions through different angles. What does Victor Von Doom look like if one thing is different? What if he had Reed's life? What if he had Strange's title? What if he had the Iron Man armor or the Infinity Gauntlet or absolute universal sovereignty? The answer, across almost all of these stories, is still Doom, still recognizable, still the same wounded person underneath all the power, still reaching towards something that he can name in the abstract, but cannot quite locate in practice. We've talked about the armor. We've talked about the kingdom, the sorcery, the comic book feats, the film history, the MCU announcement. All of that is Doom as he presents himself to the world. All iron and authority and the kind of absolute self-possession that most people only manage for a few minutes at a time before something cracks it. But there's this other thread running through all of it that I keep coming back to, And I think it's the thing that makes Doom genuinely interesting rather than just impressively powerful. Doom is, at his core, still that boy in the snow. Not in the sentimental sense that he hasn't grown or changed. He has, enormously. But the wound that formed him hasn't healed, because what would healing look like? His mother is in Mephisto's realm. His father froze to death protecting him. No amount of Latverian governance or cosmic power makes those things not true. The boy who survived them is still, somewhere inside the armor, present. John Byrne's decision that only Doom's robotic servants are allowed to see him unmasked is one of the most psychologically precise choices in the character's history. Not trusted advisors, not allies, not the people who have fought alongside him or benefited from his rule. Machines that cannot pity him, cannot judge him, cannot form any kind of opinion about what they see. Doom will only reveal himself to things that cannot respond to the revelation. That's not the behavior of someone who has made peace with his wounds. That's the behavior of someone who has locked them away so completely that even private acknowledgement has become intolerable. The moments when the mask comes close to lifting are almost always connected to Valeria. Doom named his goddaughter for his mother. That act, choosing that name, accepting that child into his life, building a relationship with someone who carries that name, is about as close as Victor gets to saying out loud that the thing he has never stopped grieving is Cynthia Von Doom. He doesn't say it. He doesn't need to. The name says it for him. In Secret Wars, there's a moment where Doom, as God Emperor, ruler of everything that remains of reality, in the full blaze of borrowed omnipotence, shows Valeria a brief flicker of what he might have been. Not the tyrant, not the monarch, not the cosmic conqueror. Something warmer and less defended. It lasts a moment, then it's gone. Susan Storm has seen it too, in various runs. There's a version of Doom in the comics who genuinely respects Sue Richards, not just strategically, but in the deeper sense that he recognizes in her something worth recognizing. He has, in certain storylines, placed her safety above tactical advantage. He has been, in ways he would never acknowledge, concerned about her. Whether this is love or something more abstract is deliberately left ambiguous, but it suggests that behind the mask there is someone still capable of that direction of feeling, even if the feeling can never be expressed in any normal way. The armor, more broadly, functions as both protection and prison. It insulates him from physical harm, from supernatural attack, from emotional vulnerability. But insulation is also isolation. The same barriers that keep threats out keep everything else out too. Every person who might have known Victor instead of Doom has been kept at a precise, controlled distance. Every relationship he has is structured around authority. He gives orders, others follow them, and within that structure, there is no space for anything that might resemble need or dependence, or the ordinary human experience of being seen, and seen accurately, and still being accepted. The irony is that what Doom most obviously wants, acknowledgement, recognition, the genuine admission that he is the best there is, requires someone to actually see him. And he has made himself nearly impossible to see. The mask prevents the very recognition he's looking for, because you can't acknowledge the genius of Victor Von Doom if you're only ever looking at the iron face of Dr. Doom. Whether this is a tragedy or a design feature probably depends on which part of the run you're reading and on whether you believe Victor knows exactly what he's doing and has accepted it, or whether the psychology runs too deep for that kind of conscious awareness. The greatest lie Doom tells the world is that he cannot be broken. The greatest lie he tells himself is that he no longer needs anything from anyone. Both are demonstrably false. He keeps going back to Mephisto for his mother. He keeps fighting Reed Richards because Reed is the one person whose opinion actually matters to him. He names his goddaughter for the woman he failed to protect. He builds a kingdom for people who once scorned his family. He saves the multiverse and recreates it in an image that includes Reed's wife and Reed's children, because those are the things he actually wanted and couldn't simply will into his own life. None of this makes him a hero. His methods are what they are, and the cost of his governance, however effective, is real. But it does make him something more interesting than a villain, and something more honest than most powerful people in any story ever quite manage to be about themselves. I think about that image sometimes. Victor alone in a corridor of Castle Doom, no witnesses, facing a cracked mirror. In the reflection, not a tyrant, not a god, just a man older than his ambitions admit, with scars that were made worse by his own impatience, carrying grief that he has never put down and probably never will. The boy who froze in the snow survived because his father gave him everything he had, and the man that boy became has spent his whole life trying to make sure the world never gets to do that to anyone again. Certainly not to him, and not, if he can prevent it, to anyone under his authority. Whether that's noble or monstrous is probably a question without a clean answer. Both seem to be true. Both seem to be the point. So that's Dr. Doom. Or at least, that's an attempt at the shape of him. Origins, methods, relationships, history, and the particular kind of tragedy that comes wrapped in iron armor and a green cloak. It's a strange thing, being genuinely excited about a villain. Most of us, in superhero stories, are supposed to be rooting against the antagonist. That's the arrangement. The heroes win, the villain is defeated, the world is safe, and we feel good about it. And yet Doom keeps complicating that arrangement, because the defeat of Doom is never entirely satisfying. It always feels like something has been lost as well as something corrected. The universe without him is slightly less interesting, slightly less dangerous, slightly less honest about the things that actual power does to actual people. I think what I want from the MCU version, ultimately, is the same thing I want from the best comics runs. Just enough complexity that the audience can't entirely resolve how they feel about him. Not sympathy exactly, and not straightforward condemnation either. Something in between. Something that sits with you after the credits roll. Something that makes you think about what you'd choose if you were the Molecule Man. And the two candidates were Reed Richards and Victor Von Doom. Because the honest answer is that it's not as simple as the genre wants it to be. Reed is good. Reed is kind. Reed is humble in ways that Doom isn't. But Doom saved the universe when nobody else could, and then governed it for 8 years. And it worked, and he admitted he was wrong, which is more than a lot of people ever manage. Both of those things are true simultaneously. The story doesn't resolve the tension between them, and the best version of the MCU handling of this character won't either. Robert Downey Jr. in the Iron Mask is, as of now, probably a year or so away from cinemas. Avengers, Doomsday in December 2026. Avengers, Secret Wars in December 2027. 2 films back to back with the full creative team and the full investment of a studio that apparently decided the only way to close out the Multiverse Saga was with the best villain the comics had to offer. I hope they let him be complicated. I hope they resist the temptation to simplify him into something the genre can resolve cleanly. I hope they give the audience the full God Emperor moment, the battle world, the genuine horror and grandeur of a reality held together by one person's extraordinary will. And I hope they find, somewhere in the spectacle, the quieter version of the story. The boy in the snow, the mask pressed too soon, the name given to a goddaughter, the man who keeps going back to Mephisto's realm because he can't stop trying to bring his mother home. If you've made it this far, thank you for spending the time. I have a fairly long video planned on the broader history of the Fantastic Four, which might be interesting if this kind of thing appeals to you. And depending on when you're watching this, there may already be a video up on the full MCU timeline of the Multiverse Saga, which connects a lot of what we talked about tonight to the broader story. And on that note, I'll let you rest. The armor will still be there in the morning. Victor Von Doom will still be ruling Latveria, or plotting something considerably larger, or both. He tends to multitask. Good night.